I've recently just finished my latest sketchbook. It's a moleskin, okay? That's how you know I'm better than you. I would say that there's about 4 major key lessons to be learned and 1 huge grievance that I'll discuss. And I've made a separate video just walking through my old sketchbook, link in the description. I can honestly say this was probably my first time critically looking back on my own work, page by page. There's some huge lessons to be learned. It's a bit embarrassing just by how simple these concepts are, and somehow you overlook these things, right? So let's take a page from the Book of Dark Souls and learn from my failures. Okay, first things first, and this is important for later. This book took me exactly 6 months to finish. I did spend probably the first 2/3 of the book just mostly doodling, drawing, sketching during class, critiques, lessons, especially art history. And during the school year, I would honestly clock my personal study time at around 4 hours a week. And this is the time that I'm setting aside for myself to study something not assignment school related for my own benefit. But you know, 4 hours a week, maybe more, maybe less, it's just so inconsistent on a week-by-week basis that it's basically negligible to me. Okay, in the last third of the book I completed, I think right after around the first month of summer, okay, and so coming from when I started it, the first month of January, it's almost exactly 6 months. Now the topic at hand, here are my 4 biggest revelations. Number 1, do tocchini-quest. Number 2, make more notes. Number 3, derive your own rules and conventions. Number 4, force an emphasis on drawing elements by switching the mediums. And number 5, okay guys, consciously draw differently. This is the sad, sad truth. And I'll get to this, alright. Okay, number 1, what is tocchini-quest? Okay, at a certain point I started just doing pagefuls of studies from one of my favorite artists, Greg Tocchini. And I chose him for very specific reasons. I wanted to figure out what exactly it was about his drawings that just made it so effective. And he's a comic artist, right? And they're so good. So I copied him. Hello, darkness, my old... But in doing so, I kind of accidentally forced myself to distill and analyze some of the main drawing elements that I'd lacked the most, that Greg was most successful in. Now in this case, to me, it was rhythm, line, quality, and head angles. Now I was doing this on a regular basis for probably a few weeks. And when I found myself drawing from imagination again, I kind of found myself drawing slightly differently now. And it seemed that for all those things that I tried to copy, analyze, deconstruct for Greg, I'd somehow managed to glean over a period of 3 weeks for myself, ingrained as a habit in my own drawing. This kind of happened completely by accident, just by me not quite knowing what exactly I wanted to draw, and I picked someone I wanted to draw and I copied him. So for all those things I really tried to observe in Greg Tocchini, I was able to gain an understanding through copying of what exactly made it so effective. Number 2, take more notes. Here's a page from my sketchbook. Okay. Okay, fine. Here's a page from my sketchbook. Yeah. Okay, so I take virtually no notes at all, and this is a really dumb thing to do. So there's this mindset of just drawing, sketching, doodling for fun. That's all well and good, but for the purpose, deliberate drawing to improve, now this should be an active process. Whereas just thinking about something or having some realization without manifesting it in speech or writing is just to have the thought of it. And a thought is literally just an electrochemical pulse through our neurons. It's a blip. It's a zappy blip, blim blam,
Blam blam!
through our minds.
Okay.
Okay, here's one weird comparison to make, okay? It's like studying for a math test. You can sit there, look at the equations, and work it all out in your mind. You can do this. I'm Asian. I can do this. But it would be so much better for you to lay down your thought process, describe the process, and there is where you catch your mistakes to better derive these solutions. Speaking of deriving, number 3, derive your own rules and conventions. Okay, I couldn't tell you how many times I've drawn these friggin' heads in perspective, man. I didn't really quite feel confident in drawing heads till I finally simplified the 5 different angles and simplified the facial forms of these angles into measurable, easy to remember proportions. So I took reference, I took measurements, and found the patterns and relationships of each pose that seemed to, more or less, be working for me at the moment. And having to have had to work for these results, I can say that it's much more ingrained than just mindlessly doing a head study off a reference or off of some 3D model. But that's not to say that I don't forget my own rules here and there, right? That still happens all the time on a regular basis. But the recall is much easier, much more forgiving, and almost instantaneous the more I do it. Okay, number 4, force an emphasis on improving drawing elements by switching your mediums. Wow, that's some words and grammar. Basically, exploring the advantages and the certain drawbacks of certain drawing mediums is a great way to force yourself to focus on a few specific drawing elements. If your weakness is in the very first stages of drawing the forms and shapes or the massing of a particular subject matter, then consider drawing in crayons or pencil crayons. Now, the nature of the medium is just such that the stroke is so broad and not conducive to rendering out small details. You won't fall into the trap of rendering out a right eye in the margin of your sketchbook.
Nice.
Some other examples would be like using a fine pen, like a high-tech C for stroke confidence, a brush pen for line weight, and, as I mentioned earlier, crayons and pencil crayons for shapes and rhythm gesture. Okay, so now a quick note in terms of this whole idea here. It's worth remembering that everyone is different, and as such, everyone will be using these drawing mediums differently. Now, for example, I get sometimes really chicken scratchy with a mechanical pencil, and I double up on lines just because the line is very light. Okay, but I don't do the same thing with a fine-tipped pen with a much more dark, unforgiving stroke. It's really hard to give direct advice on this topic because everyone uses this stuff differently, but there is one control across all these mediums, and that's you. So you can experiment, have fun, explore and figure out all your habits that you're having through all these mediums. Figure out their strengths and weaknesses for yourself, and thereby you can create a set of rules and conventions, then exploit them. Okay, finally, number 5. For 2/3 of this book, I saw virtually no improvement. Then, bam, something happened right here. The final third. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but this is exactly where, in my book, that summer had begun for me. I began actually thinking about how I was drawing what I was drawing, rather than just drawing what I was drawing. So what went wrong for the majority of the sketchbook? I will say that it's largely me drawing just for the sake of drawing no draws in the drawing draw, and drawing drawings that were drawing for the sake of drawing, you know? And always, almost 100% at the expense of my attention being divided between something that I should be present in, but instead am sneakily also half-heartedly doodling away in. Now the depressing thing is just that, is that they're doodles, right? And they're just doodles. And we need to know and distinguish ourselves the differences between a doodle, a sketch, a study, and a drawing in the drawing form. And you know what? I think that's the real issue here. And it's just that everyone draws differently. Everyone has different goals for their own drawings. And there's no answer that I can really give you here. Rather, it's one that we have to discover for ourselves. I'm really torn here because I am a big believer in learning the theory and making an informed decision based on that theory. But just speaking for myself here, I really do think that sometimes it's a very slippery slope. I'm sorry to say, but at the end of the day, numbing ourselves to thousands and thousands of YouTube videos, tutorials, speed paints, and demos aren't going to help us to become better artists. I think the best thing, the only thing proven time and time again, is just to go draw. Hey, weren't you just telling me this whole time to not do that? Oh yeah. Wow, that was a lot of information. Basically, to recap, copy someone you like, make more notes, invent a system, analyze why things work the way they do, switch up your mediums, and most importantly, consciously be drawing. Okay, deliberately draw. I hope you found that little video helpful. Please let me know what your thoughts are on the whole idea of deliberate drawing, and really help me out if you give a subscribe to the channel. Yeah, let's get to 10 subs, let's go.